He lay in a cold trench near Staraya Rusa in the spring of 1942. Mud, smelling of iron, had frozen into his greatcoat. Nearby, a wounded comrade was wheezing in a half-sleep, a young medic named Vasya, whose leg had been shattered by shrapnel. Machine gun fire from an MG-42 pinned their company to the ground. They had been out of contact with headquarters for 3 days. The most important thing was gone, the rockets for their Spagan signal pistols. Without them, they were blind and mute to their own artillery. His name was Alexei Smirnov, and before the war he had been a master craftsman at the Leningrad watch factory. His fingers, accustomed to jeweler's precision and springs thinner than a hair, were now cleaning the rifle bolt, bent over from the cold. He mechanically raked the spent cartridges into a pile by his boot, and suddenly his gaze, trained to find the smallest defects in mechanisms, caught sight of a German cartridge case from an MG-131 heavy machine gun in the pile. They had captured the barrel in a counterattack a week ago. It was slightly wider than a rocket launcher cartridge case. He rummaged through his kit bag and found the clips from a long broken 3-line Nagant revolver, a piece of copper wire from a field telephone, a pinch of gunpowder, and a tiny detonator cap. He worked all night, covered by his comrades who stayed awake. His tools were a soldier's knife, pliers, and a sharpened piece of bayonet. His hands trembled not from fear, but from monstrous concentration. This was not weapon making. It was surgery on the edge of life. At dawn, he showed Sergeant Fedotov the result of his work. Instead of the standard signal flare, the barrel of the pistol contained a modified German cartridge case, topped with a homemade tip made from tin from a can. The work looked rough, but it was well put together and solid. The sergeant sighed heavily, turned it over in his calloused fingers, and looked at the pale, gaunt face of the watchmaker, as Alexei was now known in the company. Either a medal or a court-martial engineer, he said hoarsely. An hour later, when the German infantry, supported by mortars, went on the attack, there was no choice left. The shot was quieter than usual, but a point burst out of the barrel with a hissing whistle and shot upward. And above the heads of the advancing Nazis, an uneven, crooked, but fiercely red flower bloomed. It burned for only a moment, flashing once, twice, but that was enough. Somewhere far away, beyond the forest, a siren wailed in response. And a minute later, Katyushas began to sing from our positions. The strike landed just behind the front line of the attackers, cutting off their support. The attack faltered and came to a halt. 2 hours later, after another homemade star, the long-awaited wanderers broke through to the trenches, medical carts, and a reinforcement group with ammunition and bread. That was the beginning. Alexei's ingenuity became a quiet legend that spread throughout the regiment. He made no secret of it. On the contrary, during rare moments of calm in the dugout, by the light of a cartridge smoker, also his work by the way, he showed others how to neatly crimp the edge, how to securely fasten the fuse with wire, which gunpowder was best not to use because it got damp. His workshop moved with the unit, from the swamps of Staraya Rusa to the forests near Veliki Luki, through the burned villages of the Smolensk region. Alexei was just one of thousands of lefties. In the neighboring battalion served a former blacksmith from near Tula, Ignat. In his cart, harnessed by a captured Narodnaya Strava, was an entire mobile forge. From discarded aircraft engine valves that had burned out, collected from the crash sites of our planes, he forged incredibly strong brackets, fasteners, tips for crowbars, and even surgical instruments for the medical battalion, saws for amputations, clamps. Under his hammer and on an anvil made of armor plate, dented German Wehrmacht-Behalter canisters were transformed into perfect buckets or stove lids. And then there was Professor, radio operator Mikhail. He assembled primitive but functional detector receivers from radio parts taken from destroyed German Tigers and downed Junkers. They couldn't transmit, but they picked up "Moscow is speaking" from enemy radio stations, and most importantly, they tuned into the frequencies of German tanks, warning of an impending attack half an hour in advance. His soldering iron was a sharpened copper bullet heated on that very bourgeois stove, welded from 2 tanks from a German motorcycle. In the spring of 1944, during the offensive near Vitebsk, an incident occurred that demonstrated the systematic nature of this trash war. A tank company supporting their regiment lost several vehicles in a minefield. One, a T-34, had a working gun but a broken track and a damaged side gearbox. It could not be evacuated under fire. The tank commander, a young lieutenant, raged as he looked at the immobile steel fortress. Then 3 men approached him. Alexei with his bag of spare parts, Ignat the blacksmith with his tools, and Professor. They worked under cover of a smokescreen. Overnight, literally out of junk, a solution was born. Ignat patched up the damaged gears of the reducer by welding layer upon layer of metal from a decommissioned anti-tank grenade onto the worn teeth. The professor repaired the broken wiring of the observation device using silk insulation from a captured German telephone cable. Alexei, meanwhile, used scraps of steel plates from another damaged tank to make a temporary but sturdy fastener for the track, which allowed the tank to move at low speed toward its own lines. When, at dawn, the T-34 crawled out of the crater with a roar and a screech, but under its own power, and crept toward the forest, the lieutenant, looking out of the hatch, did not shout, "Hurrah!" He took off his helmet and simply waved silently to the 3 men standing in the mud, black with soot and fatigue. It was the highest sign of recognition. Alexei advanced with his division to East Prussia. His signal workshop became practically a regular unit. His kit bag and special box contained an unimaginable arsenal. Cartridges from Soviet Shavak aircraft guns, American Browning guns from Lend-Lease aircraft, and beautiful brass from German Mauser cartridges. In January 1945, their battalion was bogged down in the hell of street fighting in Königsberg. Stone fortifications, bunkers in the basements of centuries-old churches. The advance cost enormous losses. Intelligence reported the location of a resistance stronghold, a well-camouflaged basement with a heavy machine gun. But the coordinates were approximate. In the area of the destroyed church, calling in heavy howitzer fire meant risking the lives of their own assault groups, who were lying in wait in neighboring blocks. And then Alexei offered his own, already proven but improved weapon. He would not just send a signal. He would indicate the target with an accuracy of 1 meter. All night long, he and his 2 young apprentices, whom he had trained himself, bustled about in the basement of a half-ruined house. Something new came into being. Not just a star, but a compact coordinate marker. The base was still the same 20mm cannon shell, but inside was a special experimental composition based on white phosphorus and slow-burning components. Just before dawn, the cover group went on a diversionary sortie. Under the cover of the diversionary firefight, Alexei and an experienced scout, Sergeant Voronin, crawled through a sewer collector. They ended up almost 200 meters from their target. They were counting on surprise and a single chance. Peering out of a crack in the foundation, Alexei aimed at a narrow, almost invisible embrasure in the base of the building, which the scout had pointed out. He fired. The sound was muffled, underground. The homemade projectile shattered the glass, which had been boarded up from the inside, with a dull thud, and disappeared into the black void. There was an agonizing pause of several seconds. And then, from the embrasure, and then from other cracks, came that same thick, non-dispersing smoke. It did not rise in a column, but spread like a ghostly white river. It was a perfect mark. A command with precise coordinates was sent over the airwaves. 5 minutes later, the first heavy shell came whistling down. It was followed by a second and a third. The pocket of resistance was destroyed. The way was open for the battalion. And Alexei's smoke marker entered the textbooks of military art as an example of improvisation in urban combat. On May 9, 1945, Senior Sergeant Alexei Smirnov, recipient of the Order of the Red Banner and 2 Orders of the Red Star, met not in Berlin, but again near Staraya Rusa, where their unit had returned for reorganization. It was the same damp, but now peaceful spring. He sat on a log by the tent and cleaned his trusty signal pistol. Next to him lay his field workshop box, now almost empty. From a separate compartment wrapped in an oiled rag, he took out a single cartridge case. The first one, German, the very one from the spring of 1942. It was scratched and dented by time, but carefully cleaned. He looked at it, then at his jubilant comrades who were hugging each other, firing everything that could fire into the air, laughing and crying. Someone shouted, "Lech, come on, fire your thing, a salute!" Alexei gently stroked the smooth brass with his finger. He remembered the face of Sergeant Fedotov, who died near Orsha, and the young medic Vasya, who survived and became a surgeon, and the blacksmith Ignat, and the professor. He remembered the noise, the cold, the fear, and the quiet, focused fury of creation that was born in his hands. "It's not for fireworks," he said quietly to himself. He carefully wrapped the shell casing and put it in the pocket of his gym shirt. It was not war debris. It was its key and a witness. Proof that even when there is a shortage of metal, bread, and strength, there remains an indestructible resource, the human mind. Hands that can create, and a stubborn will ready to turn a shell casing into a signal of hope, a fragment into a detail of victory, and pain and despair into an invincible skill of survival. From the first, random shell casing in a trench to the great, deafening salute of victory over the defeated Reichstag.